Go with me back to Matthew chapter 4. We were studying this morning. Just want to make a couple of points from the third temptation that Satan hits Jesus with. In verse 9, the devil says, "All this I will give you if you will bow down and worship me." We talked about it this morning. We might initially think that wasn't that big of a temptation for Jesus. But stop and think about his condition, his physical condition. Having not eaten in 40 days, having this period of time in which he was inundated with temptations. Luke's version of these temptations tells us that this wasn't just, he didn't just face 3 temptations, but he was tempted through the 40 days. And then this is kind of the culmination of those 40 days, these 3 temptations that he faced that we have recorded. And so he's in a moment of weakness. And I think Satan will come. He will take advantage of that. He will take advantage of our weakness, our weak moments, and come after us with the one thing that we think that we need, that we think that we want. And there may be that time, and it can come and go. We might say, well, today I'm feeling pretty strong. Tomorrow may not be so much. And so we need to realize that there are going to be those times all along in our lives when we may not even recognize the weakness that we're in. But because that we're presented with a temptation, and we could be vulnerable at that point, to make sure that we recognize our state. And that's when, as we've talked about this morning, as Jesus went into the wilderness, he was led there by the Spirit. And so throughout these temptations, what is happening is that Jesus does have the strength to allow the spiritual to offset the physical, to make sure that he is resting on the power of the Spirit of God that is with him and in him, to get him through this difficult time of temptation. And so he does this from the standpoint, and Satan approaches him from the standpoint of the 3 categories of sin that we talked about from 1 John chapter 2, 15 and following, the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. This is kind of that third one. It's the pride of life. And you know, there are a significant number of us that think, well, I'm kind of past that lust of the eyes type thing. At this age, it doesn't affect me like it used to. Lust of the flesh may be the same way, but the pride of life may be something that never goes away. There's always going to be a challenge to us, always going to be a temptation to us. Go with me, if you will, back to the book of Galatians really quick. In Galatians chapter 5, we're given the fruits of the Spirit, but it also gives us the things. Verse 19 describes them as the acts of the human nature. And it says those acts are obvious. And it talks about all the ones that we would recognize: sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry, witchcraft. But then he gets into a list that may fall into that category of the boastful pride of life. Pride triggers hatred. Pride brings about discord. Pride causes jealousy. Pride may throw us into fits of rage. It's pride that will cause us to act on selfish ambition. And these are all the terms that are used there in verse 20 of Galatians chapter 5. It is pride that creates dissensions between people. It's pride that causes factions to be formed between people. It is pride that causes us to envy other people, to want what they have, to want what they've earned, but yet we are envious. And he goes on and talks about other things like drunkenness and orgies and the like. But the thing about those sins that he lists there, kind of in the heart of all of that list, are things that could be triggered by this boastful pride of life. Again, that's the temptation that may never go away. Maybe the others are not as great as they used to be, or we've overcome those to the point that we feel a little bit stronger in those areas than we used to. But the pride of life, boy, that can sneak up on us, I think, and cause so much division in relationships, so much self-centeredness, that it can bring us back to the realization that those sins can cause as much destruction, can cause as much problem in our lives and in the lives of those around us as any kind of what we might call illicit sin. Pride is just as illicit in the eyes of God because of the destruction. You know, it is, I believe, a great deal that causes people to hesitate in doing what God wants them to do is not because they don't believe. It's the fact that pride gets in the way, and we set our feet in the ground and say, I will not, because this is what I want to do. Because you see the way that Jesus answers that. He says, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. Not self-serving, not pride-serving, not ego-serving, not self-centeredness, but serve the Lord your God only and worship him only. When pride is taken out of the way, it's amazing how pride can get in the way of our worship that we've just been talking about for the last several Sunday evenings. Pride can get in the way and it causes us to say, well, I'm not doing that. Even though God has done everything for us. And we just have that sense of pride, that sense of self-centeredness that causes us to hold back in our worship, in our service to God. And that just simply shouldn't be the case. Jesus was tempted with it, but so are we. We can be tempted with the pride of life that gets in the way of us worshiping and serving God acceptably. This evening, if you're not a Christian, don't let your pride stand in the way of what you need to do in submitting your will to God's will and becoming a Christian. If you are a Christian, and maybe we can help you in some way by praying for you to overcome your pride or any other need you may have, we invite you to come as together we stand and sing.